Hello, guys. Welcome to another episode of Life Reflections, written by Dheepak Thomas, brought to you by Bookmarked. Today's topic is remembering Steve Jobs. Stay hungry, stay foolish. As usual, I was scrolling through my YouTube when suddenly Steve Jobs' famous Stanford University commencement speech appeared on my feed, as if it knew I needed it. I paused, I clicked, and within minutes, I was no longer just watching a speech. I was revisiting a phase of my own life. I first heard that speech in my 20s. At the time, it didn't feel like a graduation address. It felt like someone was speaking directly to my confusion, my ambition, my hunger. It was heart touching, profound, and strangely personal. Most of you would have heard it. If you haven't, please do it. It's not just a speech. It feels like a gentle letter wrapped tenderly in three simple stories. Seeing it again gave me a nostalgic feeling. For a moment, I remembered not just the speech, but Steve Jobs himself, one of my most admired personalities. And so, here is my small reflection on that iconic speech, not as a commentator, but as someone whose life was quietly shaped by it. So, let's get into the story 1, connecting the dots. Steve Jobs dropped out of college not because he was careless, but because he didn't want to waste his parents' hard-earned money on classes that did not interest him. Instead, he audited classes that fascinated him. One of them was calligraphy. At that time, it had no practical use, no career roadmap, no clear future benefit. But years later, when designing the first Macintosh computer, that calligraphy knowledge shaped its typography, that later became Apple's signature. And he said, "You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards." That single sentence changed how many of us looked at our own uncertainty. Not everything we learn needs immediate ROI, return on investment. Sometimes curiosity itself is enough. Now, story 2, love and loss. Steve Jobs co-founded Apple in his parents' garage, built it into a multi-billion-dollar company. Now, I guess it's a trillion-dollar company. And then he was fired from his own company, publicly, painfully, completely. He described it as devastating, but later he reflected, getting fired from Apple was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. Why? Because it removed the weight of success. It made him a beginner again. He started Next. He built Pixar. Apple eventually acquired Next. He returned. It reads like cinema, but it was real life. And in that same story, he gave one of the most quoted lines in modern business philosophy. The only way to do great work is to love what you do. And he added, if you haven't found it yet, keep looking. Don't settle. That message still echoes in classrooms, boardrooms, and quiet moments of self-doubt. Now, story 3, death. At 17, he read a quote that shaped his thinking. If you live each day as if it were your last, someday you will most certainly be right. Years later, he was diagnosed with cancer. For a moment, he believed his time was limited. Facing mortality simplified everything. And in perhaps the most powerful portion of the speech, he said, "Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't let the noise of others' opinion drown out your own inner voice. Have the courage to follow your heart and intuition." Those are not motivational lines, they are reminders. He ended with words, "Stay hungry, stay foolish." Hungry, never satisfied. Foolish, willing to be a beginner. When he passed away, there was a global pause. People questioned Apple's future. Could the company survive without him? Years passed. Tim Cook did well. Apple continued to grow, and slowly we stopped talking about Steve Jobs every day. But some foundations are so strong that even decades later they quietly carry the weight of an empire. I am still deeply inside the Apple ecosystem. iPhone, MacBook, iMac, AirPods. Yes, they come at premium prices. Yes, there are excellent alternatives. Samsung, Sony, and many others build outstanding products. But the integration, the aesthetic minimalism, the seamless experience, Apple created a different emotional category. In most categories, there is one best brand for each segment, one for laptops, one for phones, one for audio. But Apple built something rare, a brand that aspires to be the best in almost everything it touches. That magic did not happen accidentally. It was built on vision, it was built on obsession, it was built on storytelling. Watching an Apple keynote during the Steve Jobs era felt like watching cinema. We marked calendars, we waited for live streams. Product launches felt like cultural events. That level of anticipation is rare in business history. Steve Jobs was not a perfect man. He was intense, difficult, demanding, sometimes harsh. His personal life had complexities. Leadership with him was not always gentle. But greatness is rarely neat. But perhaps the most important gift he left us was not a device, it was a framework. Trust your curiosity, love your craft, accept loss, remember death. Stay hungry, stay foolish. Thanks for listening. If this made you pause, think, smile, and reflect, that means a lot. Signing off with love, Sam.